interview that is all about empowering a league of extraordinary mothers on how to lay a strong foundation for health and happiness in our teenage girls. Today's interview is with Vikki Kelly. Vikki offers over 20 years experience in mindset development and training. Through juggling a variety of roles, including being a mum of 3, a business owner and a speaker, Vikki understands firsthand how the demands of a busy life can affect our ability to thrive in any area. Vikki's background in positive psychology includes hypnotherapy, meditation, combined with her passion to benefit as many lives as possible through more mindful living, has seen her create programs and presentations that have impacted the lives of many thousands. Thank you so much for being here, Vikki.
Hey, beautiful Edwina. Nice to be back with you.
Yeah, it is. It is. I'm so excited about this interview. Vikki, let's start with what brought you to be doing the work that you do.
Well, interestingly, my very first introduction to the contemplative world, or meditation, or mindfulness, as it's now known in the modern day, was through my own personal practice. I think as a teenager, and probably most of us can relate, that as a teenager I grew up being knocked around by my emotions and my thoughts and feelings, and chose not to go down, because of my family upbringing, thankfully, chose not to go down the medication path, which is what many teenagers who are experiencing what I would call anxiety now, what I hadn't labelled it then, but really for me it was just being knocked off balance by my emotions and my thoughts. And so I was luckily introduced to meditation at a very early age, in my late teens, but really at an early age for most people. And so I had my meditation world is grounded in Vipassana, so 10-day silent retreat. So I went into deep immersion very right from the very beginning. And from I remember my very first retreat in silence, and for 2 days I thought I was going to die. And then it was about on the 4th day I had the epiphany, hang on a minute, I'm not struggling anymore. I feel this ease. And it was for the very first time in my life I recognized that I'm not my thoughts. I'm the observer of my thoughts. And those thoughts, if I hook into them and lock down on them, create my mood, create my energy, and that's where I would source my behavior from. And so it was not only affecting myself, it was affecting the relationships and the people around me. And so when I was able to liberate out of that and realize, hey, I'm not my thoughts, I'm sort of the conductor and the orchestra at the same time, it was really empowering. And I was able to then choose the thoughts and feelings that I sourced my energy from. And it wasn't that I pushed away those negative feelings, because we all have them. It was I was able to walk alongside them and see them for what they are, not who I was. And so that was really exciting. And then I went and, as a result of that, studied behavioural science. But when I studied behavioural science, which was a long time ago, the behavioural science was grounded in the negative emotions. And so it didn't serve what my vision was, to take this idea of not being knocked around by your thoughts. It didn't serve that. So I dropped out and studied hypnotherapy and went into what was then the smaller, more esoteric applications or teachings around positive psychology. And so that's where my background was. And then went straight into training and development, because I specialised in conversational trance and worked predominantly, and still do for the last 25 years, with the chiropractic profession and the vitalistic side of the chiropractic profession. And more recently, in the last 10 years, been teaching meditation to individuals, corporates, schools, teaching social and emotional learning programs within schools and the tertiary sector. And and now I get invited to share with you, which is so cool.
I want to go back, because I love the idea that we're not our thoughts. When my girls say, I can't do that, I'm too shy, very annoying mum that I am, I like to say, well, you're not actually shy. You have a habit of being shy. It's just a thought. You can actually decide to and practice to be something different. We give ourselves these labels, and I know I'm sure I still carry lots of labels in my own head, but carried really damaging labels for many, many years, well into my 30s, nearly 40, before I cottoned on to this process that we're not our thoughts. So it's just so empowering if we can give our girls those messages much earlier.
Much earlier. And that's like we teach reading, arithmetic and writing. There's also deep value in teaching our kids how to be with themselves, how to play well with others, and we're losing that connectedness. And so it's because of the way that things are automated. And even teaching, education as it stands currently is going through a massive transformation, thankfully. And the great news about that is we're looking more at how we can engage our people to maintain and keep them present, more mindful, so that they're absorbing and allowing the learnings to wash over them in a way that, with an open mind and open heart, has a completely different effect than when they're stressed and anxious and just wanting, can you just give us the crib notes so that we can study for the test and get the marks that we need to get to the next thing. And it's we've become a society where measuring and marking and social comparison is rampant out there. And then we add the layer of technology to that, and I wouldn't want to be a teenager without these social emotional skills. And so you bring a perfect point into that, in that you illuminating your beautiful kids to the fact that they don't need to be that label, whatever it is that they've labeled themselves. It is just a thought that became a habit. And that habit was wired into their brain in a way that now it's so inherent and unconscious that the habit basically owns them. And so the aim through mindfulness practice is to bring those first two elements of emotional intelligence, which is being aware, hang on a minute, what am I feeling? Oh, it's only a feeling, or it's only a thought. Being able to be open to it without pushing it away. And then the second element of EQ, or emotional intelligence, is being able to manage and regulate that. And so teaching our young people through mindfulness practices, through modeling, and we not always, I'll own that. I'm not always the best model as a parent.
None of us are perfect to be here. None of us are perfect.
Oh, Edwina.
It does not exist.
You set me free.
It does not exist.
Exactly. And I think that programs like this that you're so dedicated and passionate about, and inviting all of us people to be able to share small snippets, creating programs like this creates this thing called a shared humanity. And we're biologically wired to connect, but all of our current modeling is folding us and pruning that away from us. And so being able to create programs like this where you can look at me and say, you're not alone, Vic, it's like, oh, thank you. And that is essentially a one of those micro moments of mindfulness. And so mindfulness in its modern day form, and what I've come to learn through all of my teachings and the absolute growing body of amazing scientists that are out there dedicated to this contemplative work because they know of the value. What we know to be true more than ever before is that it's not about being on the cushion, sitting in the perfect position, chanting or kumbaya or burning incense and wearing chiffon, going on a retreat, having to check out of life like I did in the early days. It's the small but frequent micro moments of just dropping in, of just taking a moment to arrive, that has a compounding effect on our brain. And aside from all of the other esoteric or spiritual implications of that, of which whether you subscribe to them or not, it doesn't matter, because what those micro moments are doing on a purely structural level is changing the wiring in your brain in a more positive way. And that's just got to be a good thing.
Yeah. So that's the why, isn't it? You know,
Yeah.
we before we implement any of these little changes that can help us, you know, thrive more in our lives, it's understanding why we want to do them first and foremost is key.
And it's a double why. It's a double why. It's one, because we live in a highly stressful environment, or we live in conditions that lend itself to keeping us stressed and rushed and moving and keeping us distracted. And what that does in the system is close off the system, lock it down, doesn't allow us to be in this rest and relax state. We're in the fight, flight or freeze state, so in a low to medium grade stress. So mindfulness practice allows you to cool off that system. But there's also, what we're learning more and more about, is there's just a really healthy, vibrant, vital, there's just a better way for the brain to be. There's a better state for the brain to be in, and it's open.
Yeah.
And when it's in an open state, and there's just nutrients to the brain, superfoods to the brain, if you like, that we can produce through mindfulness practice, that are just really good for the brain and good for the brain's health. Yeah. And so there's the undoing, the cooling off part of mindfulness, but then there's also there's a mode of the brain that's just more effective than a different mode of the brain. And so instead of traveling through life with a handbrake on, we're, through mindfulness practice, taking that handbrake off, opening it up, and being able to live our daily lives with less energy output, and which creates more energy reserve to enjoy life, which is really important.
What I hear from that is that it's this magic of making it an internal process rather than external to feel better.
Yeah, the inner work.
We're in this society where life is going to be better when we have a different outfit or a different haircut or a better home or a better car, or all things that are external. Whereas if we can bring that joy from an internal place rather than placing it on external needs, doesn't that take the pressure off?
Doesn't it take the pressure off? And what we know to be absolutely true is all of those things that you've talked about, those external things, don't actually have any long-term effect on our happiness. You know, we all have a happiness set point, if you like, a platform, and yours might be higher than mine or vice versa. But what mindfulness practice does, and when I talk mindfulness practice or meditation, I'm not talking about getting into a formal practice and doing, say, what I do, going on retreats as such, as much as I would love to invite people to explore that. But to just begin with merely a breath or some eye contact, some, and I call this with the kids, I call it kind, appropriate, non-creepy eye contact, which sends them into a laughing spin. Because, Edwina, I remember when I was young, you know, I was brought up to make eye contact with people that I engaged with.
Yeah.
What I know and have noticed, and interestingly, what many of the businesses I work with now have noticed, is that young people don't have that quality, that ability to be able to connect with people in a meaningful way through eye contact. And so for the first time in my 20-something year training and development work, in the last 2 years, I've been invited into businesses to train their frontline people, so customer service frontline teams, in the value of eye contact. And it's the first time ever. And I asked the why. Why am I coming to do this? And they said because they don't know how to. They spend so much time looking down in their screens or communicating with their peers in a non-verbal, non-face-to-face way, because it's through text, that they've lost that ability. And what we know in the brain is, you know, neurons that fire together wire together. Neurons that no longer fire together no longer wire together. So when we don't use these inherent biological interpersonal connection tools,
Yeah.
then the brain prunes them away and uses those resources for other things.
Yeah.
And so probably the prime example of that is, our kids are so tech savvy because they've wired their brains like that.
Yeah.
And the cost of that, though, is, and we're seeing it all across the world, the cost of that is an emotional cost to their well-being. And so that's why we're seeing a rise in anxiety, a rise in suicide or attempted suicide in our young people is at an alarming level. And so there's a cost, there's a cost to all of this automation that's going on. There's a cost of living in constant distraction. And so my work and the joy in my work is being able to introduce and help people to reconnect with the relationship first that they have with themselves, and then their amazing ability to be able to connect with others in a really positive and meaningful way, which just brings joy to everyone.
Absolutely, absolutely. One of the other speakers on this summit is a gorgeous woman called Jacqueline Way, who started a not-for-profit called 365 Give, and it was born, I don't know if you've come across Jacqueline, she did a TEDx talk that was enormously successful, but it started from encouraging people to give, and just through the act of giving we have this enormous impact on our well-being. But one of the things she talks about giving is simply a smile, making eye contact and smiling at somebody. And I know that when I walk around, I've become much more conscious of doing that, and the number of people that their face lights up, because it's so rare that somebody just out of the blue looks at you.
Isn't it ironic that it's how did we get to this point where a smile is rare?
Yeah.
Where that moment, that micro moment of me connecting with you is a rarity out there. It's and that's, I think we have a real opportunity, and all the mums and dads and parents or carers out there have a real opportunity to reignite that within our young people. And I feel like programs like this, I'm always excited to contribute with programs like this, because it's that opportunity for us to reclaim that connection element of our lives, because that's how we exist today. We're biologically wired to connect with each other because we have to reproduce. And if we lose that and become disconnected from people, then we stop caring.
Yeah.
And when we stop caring, we stop being able to advance in a meaningful way. Yeah. And so it's a really scary and exciting time at the same time, because I was with a group of young kids this morning. They were 5 to 10-year-olds, so pre-teens, teenagers, and with their parents doing some meditation with them. And we're in our second week this week of an 8-week program, and the parents were saying it was these kids, 5 to 10-year-olds, that were driving the homework practice. Yes. So their mindfulness practices. We did one of the things that I teach is highlights, hurdles, and high fives. So it's a way to communicate at the dinner table, for instance, saying, what are your highlights, what are your hurdles? So that's the difficult conversations that we sometimes avoid. But were there any hurdles today? And the high fives are high-fiving yourself or someone else, an acknowledgement. And so that was their homework for last week. And the feedback was, I have a different relationship already with my 5 to 10-year-old. Yeah. Not because I feel like I'm doing anything different, but I must be, or I'm connecting in a different way. And that's what's making the real difference.
Yeah. Yes, it's beautiful. So I think the other work that I remember you're doing at the moment is with teenagers, but teenagers more in distress. How did that group come about, or what's that?
So I think I'm based in New Zealand, and in New Zealand there has been, over the last 5 years plus, a real awareness around the growing but of teenagers, particularly teenagers with anxiety. But in addition to that, we have the lower socioeconomic group of people that don't have access to some of the things that other people have access to. And so within my local community, there's a young women's youth group that has been developed through a community initiative, and I became part of that. And so these girls are 13 to 18, about in that range, and I've been working with them for about 18 months now. And I help them with some mindfulness practices and some life skills, and so that social emotional learning program. So helping them to understand and develop and strengthen their capacity to be more of themselves and be happy in their own skin. And so that happens to be through mindfulness, and we do that as a mindfulness practice. But the bigger vision of that is so that they can be comfortable in their own skin, and then be able to take that themselves out to the world in a really positive, open and kind way, because some of these girls have experienced things that are horrific and awful against their character. And so it's been quite an incredible program. We fortunately, and this will give you an indication of the depth of despair that these girls have, we've had 2 suicides in 18 months in the group of 16 girls.
Gosh.
And it's just another reason for me to get out to more people. You know, it's that I can't. When I turn it inwards, it's like, how can I get what could I have done more of? What could I, so we do make things about ourselves. Yeah. And then when you can just take a moment and say, okay, look, this has happened. It is what it is, and as difficult and sad and awful as it is, how can we learn from this? Yeah. And it just deepens my passion for getting out to as many people as possible, particularly the young ones, and letting them know that difficulty, sadness, setbacks are part of life. Yeah. And anybody that tells you any different, they've got their head in the sand. Yeah. And however, our ability to walk alongside that is part of who we are. Yeah. And I would I'd suggest that many of us, some of our most pivotal advances in life have been born out of our most painful or difficult situations. And so our ability to be able to be with that without creating comparison of my life to yours comes out of our ability to be able to be aware first and foremost. And we can only be aware when we have attention to it, when we're able to stabilize and settle our attention in the moment. And so through working with these girls, and just through some really easy mindfulness-based techniques for their social emotional learning, everyone has noticed a real difference. Some of them are the ups, the great stories are, some of them have gone into work. Some of them have been liberated out of the idea, the conditioning that they're going to be pregnant by the time they're 16, and probably by the time they're 20, they're going to have 3 or 4 children from potentially different backgrounds and partners, and because that's what they've generationally grown up with. Yeah. So for the very first time, they're seeing that there's something different possible for them, regardless of where they are within their environment. And we know that petri dish, that environment, creates the conditions for us to be able to thrive or to perish. And so we're just offering them conditions from the inside out, rather than feeling like, well, if I was in somewhere different, if I had a different mum or a different dad or a different life, I'd be a different person. That's not always a guarantee. Of course, there is that is of influence, but at the grassroots, what I can do is offer you love and kindness, and let you know that you're not alone in this. Yeah. And simply by doing that through our mindfulness practices, these girls are just brighter, and they see that they have many of them see that they have a different possibility for a different future. There's still the unfortunate stories which I highlighted, and yet that just deepens our commitment to getting out to as many people as possible, because there is a real, we live in a partially broken world, and so it's up to us, and up to us to be able to give our young people hope. And they are ripe for it. They are more open and more available to living differently than, I think, any generation that I've worked with previously. And not that I'm that old, of course, Edwina. However, being in my 50th year, I've worked with a number of generations, and the young ones, our teens now, and even earlier than that, are really open, and even when it comes to technology, they're using it quite differently than say my kids who are in their 20s. And so it's really illuminating to notice that these kids are open and they're available and they're ready for these social emotional tools. We just have to step up and be able to reconnect with that and offer that back to them. And I just happen to do it through mindfulness.
Oh my goodness, they are so lucky to have you. To have, I know for myself, I grew up with what I call a disorder of not good enough. Everything was not good enough. I wasn't smart enough. I wasn't thin enough. I wasn't pretty enough. Nothing enough. And I know that I'm not alone, and I know how debilitating that thought process is. And there was just one woman who happened to be a naturopath, who gave me that kind of warmth and attention that you're talking about giving to the girls in your group. That was the catalyst for turning things around for me. And it has to be that one person that sees you and makes you believe that you're worth seeing and you're worth attention and you're worth love. And it makes all the difference.
It makes all the difference. And we can all be that. We can all be that for someone else.
Yeah.
The other important element of that is making sure that we are available to be supported. And particularly that's a really important distinction with our teenagers. And I have a 15-year-old Grace. She's my youngest. And that's one of my work-ons. I'm very good at being able to, offer help and give help to other people, not so good at taking care of myself, and not so good at making myself available to be cared for. And I think that's a really important distinction between teenagers and carers. Is yes, you're there and you're there to guide and care and help them. It's also really important for them to know when you're being knocked off balance, when you're not doing okay, when you're having a difficult time, so that you can be available for them to care for you in their own way. And that is a really important one of those. It's almost like a grounding point in that social emotional process. Is yes, it's important to be open and connected to others, but what that also means is that you need to be open and available in your difficult times and not shut down in those times, because that's what you'll be modeling for your teenagers. The cups, we're always optimistic and up and bright, and like Facebook, our beautiful lives are plastered across Facebook. We can Photoshop and text and edit out everything that doesn't suit us. That's not life, though.
No. And
so I think as a parent, being able to, it doesn't have to be the details, but simply, honey, I'm really tired. I'm doing it hard at the moment. So if we can work together, if I'm a bit grumpy, let me know kindly.
Slap the door in my face that doesn't so well.
I think if we all think about most of our tension and conflict that comes with our teenagers, and it comes because our teenagers are biologically working towards separating themselves from us, and yet as parents we still want control, understandably, and particularly because of what they are exposed to out there, and what's available to them in the form of guilty pleasures are so much more than what was ever available to me.
Yeah.
What they have access to online is disturbing in some ways. And so they're busy trying to assimilate with that. We're busy trying to lock them down, but they're biologically wired in their teenage years to be trying to move away from parents and connect with peers, because that's what they're meant to be doing. And so recognizing that and being able to help them on that journey and support and guide them with that through those conversations, through face-to-face. So quality time and quantity time, and there's a beautiful dynamic balance there. You know, you can sit with your kids at dinner, but if you're letting them be on devices, or you're on devices, or you're distracted by what you've got to do after dinner, or what, if you're distracted in any way, then that's not quality time. Yeah. It's just time, and time has an inherent value of quantity and quality. And being able to if you can't give them quantity time, just give them a moment of quality, because that's going to make a difference. We've got a rule. We've got a rule, a guideline. It's a rule.
You will do.
In our class, and it's please look at me while I'm speaking with you. Yeah. And that sometimes, often, I'll even admit, Grace has to remind me of that, because I'll be tapping away on my computer, and she'll say, Mum, she might come into my office and say, Mum, and I'll say, yep, tap, but still being in my computer. And she has to say, Mum, please look at me while I'm talking with you. And since we've done that for years and years now, and it makes a huge difference.
Yeah. And it is a skill. All these things are skills to be learned.
It's a skill.
Yeah.
It's a skill. And it's also a skill that we've got to this point too.
Yeah.
We've practiced it so much that we're really good at being distracted. Like, we are masters of distraction. Yeah. And now, essentially, our brain owns that and has wired in a way that we don't even have to think about being distracted. We're just off on the next shiny thing because we've wired ourselves towards that.
Yeah.
It's going to take time and patience and practice, but it's not going to take a whole lot of time. No. It's those micro moments every single day of eye contact, of touch, of, being, embracing your kids and being there and present with them.
Yeah. My children went through the Steiner school system when they were little, and they would, so sweet, they'd line up outside the classroom before they go into class, and then they'd have to shake hands and say good morning to their teacher, and actually, we're encouraged to look them in the eye. And it's all part of that skill learning.
Yes, just like we teach them to read and write and do math, it's time. 50 years ago, there wasn't physical education in classes because we didn't need it, because kids ran around a lot more. Now we need whole PE programs. Now we're teaching our kids how to eat well. Yeah. Well, I don't remember even when I was at school being taught how to eat.
No.
What to eat, what not to eat.
Yeah.
I don't remember the sugar conversation.
No. Well, it didn't exist.
It didn't exist.
No.
And yet it does now. It does. These kids know more about sugar than I do, and how it is affecting their well-being.
Yeah. And
so now we're just, in the last 5 to 10 years, there's just this growing acknowledgement that we need to teach these social emotional skills, because kids aren't getting them at home. They're not getting them in the playground as much as they used to, because they're not playing in the playground as much as they used to. Yeah, after school, they're sitting on a computer or sitting in it. The amount of time that we're spending in our technologies is
alarming
and surprising. You'd be surprised how much time, you think, a few hours, it's about 8, and so it's a lot. But it's not the technology. Technology has gifted us with some amazing abilities to connect. However, our relationship with the technology is a real challenge, and that's really alarming and really concerning. And it's owning us. Our technology owns us. You know, I lost my phone the other day for 10 minutes, and I think I had a panic attack.
Yeah.
Literally. And I know this stuff.
I know.
And it wasn't until afterwards I looked back and thought, oh my goodness,
Yeah.
Kelly, you.
It's simple stuff. You know, once upon a time, I grew up in Canberra, and we left there when I was 8, and I can still remember my phone number, 956917. I couldn't tell you what my husband's phone number is now off by heart, because you don't have to dial anything in. You just push a button and it's done.
Yeah.
So the loss of a phone means I don't even know how to call anyone, because I don't know anybody's phone number.
No.
Yeah.
So you know, and there's I've worked and spent time at you know, the Silicon Valley giants of Google and Facebook, and they're writing algorithms, so you know that they're making sure that we're wiring our brains to be addicted to these things.
Yeah.
It's, you know, it is that yeah, they are the pushers of the this century's crackalicious. You know, they're looking for ways to make sure that we're getting that dopamine hit.
Yeah.
The swipe is the dopamine hit. Yeah. The likes are the dopamine hit. And every time it's we're getting that hit of dopamine in our brain, it's causing us and wiring us to have it. And if I don't have it, in fact, now it's prime example was my little phone situation. It was affecting my very survival.
Yeah.
And they know exactly what they're doing. However, in saying that, and this is the teenagers coming through into Silicon Valley, into these environments now, they are the ones that are driving social change. They're saying it's not okay. It's not okay that people knowingly are writing these algorithms and platforms to get us addicted in the way that we are. It's not okay that we are creating platforms so that we can then sell people's information as a commercial entity.
Yeah.
To the breadth that we're doing. Yes, of course, you know, Facebook example is free, and we know that we're giving them information to sell. But what they have been doing with it is questionable. And so, thankfully, though, there's this grassroots movement of these younger people. So this is this next generation coming through saying it's not okay anymore. I don't want this anymore.
Yeah.
And we're seeing it across so many platforms, or in so many areas of life. We're seeing it in medicine. You know, the younger doctors are saying, actually, it's not okay that the drug companies are buying us off so that we don't want to be bought.
Yeah.
It's happening. There's just a greater awareness, and there's a waking up. And so as parents, I think of young teenagers, we can jump on board that waking up and strengthen that waking up muscle. Because what I know to be true within the depths of my heart is when we're mindful, when our kids are mindful, when they're present, they just make better choices.
Yeah.
Better choices about themselves, their situation, what they're willing to put into their body, what they're willing to consume in the way of information. We all just make better choices when we're mindful.
And, you know, I think that you and I grew up in an era where we perhaps didn't question like they do now. So if you taught something in school, it's just fact.
Yes.
If mum and dad say something, it's just fact. Now we're seeing a generation that are coming up that are much more inclined to, hopefully with respect, question and say, well, okay, that's one point of view, that's one opinion. Let's explore a few others and just see what fits with me. And that's what I encourage so strongly in my kids, is just, you know,
blessing and a curse.
Yeah. Oh yeah. But you know, if we're talking about empowerment, what's more empowering than having a curious mind?
Oh, and that is one of the components of mindfulness. So it's being able to, mindfulness, if we were to define it, is being here in the present moment in an open and curious way, a non-judgmental way.
Yeah.
And so curiosity is one of the things that is it's a side effect of mindfulness practice. Is you just become more open, which, you know, it's the why, the 3-year-old, why, but why, but why, but why. I think there's value in that, you know, so that you can come to your own decision. It's harder to do that when you're locked down or distracted. If your mind's out there constantly, you're just running off your programs, your conditioned programs. Some of those are of value, but we all know that some of them aren't. And the reason, and that's the reason that habits are so hard to change, is because we've wired them into our brain, and that they're unconscious. So they're not coming from the conscious part of the brain, they're coming from the unconscious part of our brain. And so to change that habit, we've got to shift it and create a conversation between the unconscious and the conscious. Mindfulness practice allows us to do that. It boosts our chances of being able to show up as the better version of ourselves more of the time in an unconscious way, rather than always having to think, am I in my best self?
So I know that there's going to be many mums watching this that are going, okay, well, this is all well and good, but if I'm not going to sit on a cushion with my incense and my flowing chiffon, how do I put this into practice? How do we put this, you know, incorporate this into our daily world?
First and foremost, through your own personal practice. So sometimes people get into the, well, yes, this is great for my teenagers. Go teenagers and do this thing called mindfulness. Go and sign up for a program. Or here, read this book. You need to do this. And then we go, we go about our lives in a mindless state and don't notice really any difference, because we're, you know, seeing the same thing. And so first and foremost, I'd suggest that carers, parents, aunties, uncles, begin a practice of their own. And that doesn't include being on a cushion burning incense. It's
if you want to.
Yes. I always say to the tertiary students and above, you know, when things are going your way, it's really easy to be open and kind and caring and generous. When things aren't going your way, that's when the rubber meets the road, and that's where one of the areas that our mindfulness practice can come in. And so, you know, when they're stressed, I say, so what I'd suggest is that you learn to hit the pub. And so it's like, you know, you get their attention, then it's like, hit the pub, okay? And so hitting the pub is pausing, unplugging, and breathing.
Okay.
And we can liberate that with a smile. So it's pubs. We can hit multiple pubs. So it's pause, unplug, breathe, and smile. So the pause is about calling back your attention from wherever it is, in the past, in the future, somewhere else, a feeling in your body, just calling it back. So you're pausing. It could be pausing when you wake up in the morning before you roll over and check your emails or check your likes or check for those of us who still have the phone in the bedroom. All I can say is, number one, get the mistress out of the bedroom. You can buy an alarm clock. There's this, it seems people say, I use it for my alarm clock. And I'm like, in the olden days.
Once upon a time
in the olden days, there was things called alarm clocks.
Which you might actually struggle to find in a shop, I might add.
Yes, exactly.
I did.
Exactly. So pause, unplug, and unplugging is just that unplugging from, and it doesn't mean from technology, just technology. It might be unplugging from whatever it is that's holding your attention from wherever you are. Yep. It could be, you could be in the middle of an argument. It's pausing, unplugging from the argument, taking a breath, particularly focusing on your out breath, because that's what cools our stress systems off, is our out breath, and then liberating that settled attention with a smile. And so by doing that, you're essentially telling your brain that you're happier, and that it's okay, and that most importantly, you're safe.
Yeah.
And so even doing that twice a day, taking a couple of mindful breaths, deep breath in, a long breath out, that's going to make a difference. And in the moment, you'll feel different.
Yeah.
But it'll also have, and this is where these micro moments come in. One breath, even one breath a day, has a compounding effect over time. And so over time, you'll begin to notice that you're not knocked off balance by some things that you used to be, that you're not owned by your thoughts as much. You might even find yourself being focused on your breath because it becomes unconscious, and you go, wow, I think I just had a mindful moment. Look at me go. In addition to that, though, you'll notice if you then do some of those exercises with your kids. So it might be if you're preparing meals together, it might be, let's take a breath. It might be, and it doesn't even have to be the unicorns and rainbows, woo woo, chanting kumbaya. Okay, everyone, we're now going to be this new family, this new positive, beautiful family who never speaks ill of anybody. It's not about that. It might be that you implement something like highlights, hurdles, and high fives. It might be affirmations. We all, and particularly with the younger teens, affirmations are a great way of creating a few minutes together. And there's one practice that has worked amazingly with lots of kids from the age that they know their alphabet, basically. So it's an alphabet practice, and you're calling in all of the attributes of that in parallel with the alphabet. So, for instance, it would be, I call in amazing, I call in brave, I call in courage, I call in determination, and we're just going through the alphabet. And because we're layering affirmations with having to get creative, because you get to X and it's, I call in excellent. And there is no right or wrong way. It's not about, oh, that was a better word, or I said that yesterday. It's just calling that energy in. And we know that words have energy, but simply, if nothing else, we're, for the time that it takes us to recite the alphabet and attributes, we're creating a mindful time. And we can do that with our kids. We can also add the element of, and it was my beautiful daughter Grace who said, why don't we say it for ourselves and then say it for each other as well? And so then the second element of that is, Edwina, my beautiful friend, I wish for you abundance. Edwina, my beautiful friend, I wish for you beauty. And so that's in the East, it's called metta practice. So it's loving kindness. And so loving kindness, first and foremost, directed within for ourselves. And then the loving kindness, once we've directed it inwards, we're able to turn it and shift it outwards towards others. And so that is a westernized version of the metta practice, which is the loving kindness practice of the East. And so that's another practice. For those of your student subscribers that brush their teeth, we all brush our teeth. Most of us brush our teeth, and not that this is a dental hygiene lesson at all, but brushing your teeth with your non-dominant hand will call your attention, because you have to concentrate. And so that is you're strengthening your mindfulness muscle simply by having a practice like that. Washing yourself when you get in the shower in the opposite direction than you normally would.
Yeah.
You might miss a few spots the first few days, but you're having to settle your attention with concentrating and focusing on your body.
Yeah.
Now, for some of us, that can bring up different narrative about our bodies. But again, that's your chance to just drop in and be mindful about what you actually are thinking about your body, and be open and loving and kind with your body as you would be with somebody else's.
Yeah. With because I'm such a foodie, everything comes back to food with me one way or another. But mindful eating, just
Mm.
like, I call my eldest son a human vacuum cleaner, because when you watch him eat, it's just like this. I don't think he tastes anything much. He's 18 and the food just goes in, and he's always been like that. And mindful eating, if you try and eat opposite hand, it slows you right down.
It
You
slows
actually
you
have
right
to
down.
think about what's going in.
And just taking that, the very first mouthful,
Yeah.
that's a micro practice. So the very first mouthful that you take,
Mm.
just pausing, unplugging and breathing before you do that, putting that first mouthful in and just feeling the texture, the temperature, the saliva in your mouth, that the miracle of your body is already starting to create that digestive process. And just being able to be present with that makes a huge difference. I worked with one of your other people, Damien Christoph, one of your other contributors, on a program in New Zealand called Downsize Me, and I was the mindset person on that program. And that was one of the things that we did with our people in the program. And that and the breath work that I did with the contestants were two of the keys that they said really made a difference to them, because they thought about what they were eating. And so when they paused, so gathered their attention, and stabilized it with what was in front of them, they were able to make a better choice. And the number of times that they chose to halve their meal or not eat what was in front of them because they paused and became aware, versus just, and I think we've all been in that situation when it comes to food. Food is one of those things that can be so attached to our emotions and our emotional states. We can declare in the morning that we're going to eat really well and be only have live, green, beautiful food, and then by 4:00 in the afternoon be inhaling the contents of the fridge, because we're mindless, because of the day has taken over and our habits set in. And so taking that mindful mouthful for ourselves first and foremost, but in addition, even doing that collectively as a family would be a great thing. Things like just designing where possible to, at the very least, and this sounds ironic and really simple, but most families don't do this, having at least one meal together each week. Device free, television free, everything just with the food.
Yeah. I say each day.
I
Yeah.
know, Edwina. I don't eat with my family each day, although I know the absolute value of that. However, we would 4 to 5 times a week have meals together and prepare together and clean up together, and that's a mindful practice.
Yeah.
But if you're not doing that, I really cannot
Overemphasize,
maximize the value and the spillover effect of that into across all areas of your life. And your kids will be more attuned, they'll be more connected, they'll be more willing to forgive you for your for your parenting. They'll be more patient, they'll be more tolerant, they'll be more available as teenagers.
That's got to be a perfect way to wind this up. I know, there's other things that I was desperately wanting to ask you about, but I'll just direct people. I know your TEDx talk was the 3-second kiss.
Oh yes, hug a lot.
Yeah.
3 seconds on, go heart to heart. For those of you who are in an intimate relationship, all I can say is try for 30 days the 3-second kiss. 3-second kisses when you leave and 3-second kisses as you come back together. That the 3-second kiss for in relationships is by far the most commented on or the most fed back to me about the difference it makes in people's worlds without doing anything else. They just decided that, most people just go, let's just try the 3-second kiss. We'll do it for 30 days after they've been to one of my programs.
Yeah.
It makes a huge difference. So get connected, hug more. It's the 8th wonder of the world.
I know that people are going to want to hunt you down, Vikki, and learn more.
And hug.
Hunt you down.
I'm always available for a hug.
So where's the best place for people?
VikkiKelly.com.
Yep.
If they just go to VikkiKelly.com, all of my resources are there. I have a book available that they can have a look at, excerpts of the book, purchase that online. There's a survey that they can do there to give yourself a little bit of a benchmark of where I'm at in terms of how your emotions and thoughts are affecting the way you are and where you'd love to be. Gives you a little bit of a map of how to move forward. In addition to that, a number of your beautiful people will have access to some gifts of my book, which you'll provide a link for.
Yes.
And that's got about 30 plus micro practices in it that are great for teenagers as well. So if you don't choose to have the book, give it to your teenager. Lots of teenagers use it as their journal, as a resource, as just another one of their ways to delay going into their social media platforms. They'll do an exercise and then do that, so that we can create a relationship that's we coexist with these things. We don't completely go and live on an island and throw out all of our devices and because that's not a value either. So VikkiKelly.com is probably the best place for that.
Yeah. And for everyone, go and check out Vikki's talk on TEDx. It's great. Thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you. I wish I could be there so we could hug.
Oh, me too. One day I'll hunt you down, Vikki. Don't you worry.
Good.
Thank you, and we'll talk again soon. Bye for now.